Welcome to Mr. Shadow's Stories. Tonight, we venture into the lonely world of overnight radio, where DJs sit alone in soundproof studios, their only companions the static between songs and the voices that call from the shadows. Turn down your lights, turn up your volume, and prepare yourself for 3 true tales that will make you question every sound you hear in the dead of night. Let's begin. Story 1: The Listener Who Knew Too Much. My name is Marcus, and for 5 years I was the overnight DJ at WKRP, a small AM radio station in rural Pennsylvania. I took the shift because it paid more than the daytime slots, and honestly, I enjoyed the solitude. From midnight to 6 in the morning, the station was mine. No management breathing down my neck, no coworkers interrupting my flow. Just me, the music, and whoever was listening out there in the darkness. The station itself was an old building, constructed sometime in the 1950s. It sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by woods on 3 sides. During my shift, I was completely alone. The daytime staff would leave by 11, and I wouldn't see another human being until the morning show host arrived at 5:30. I'd developed a routine over the years. I'd arrive around 11:15, check the playlist, prep my segments, and settle in for the long night ahead. The studio had thick, soundproof walls, a large window that looked out into the production room, and another window that faced the parking lot. I could see my car under the single streetlight, and beyond that, nothing but darkness and trees. Everything changed on a Tuesday night in October. It started with a phone call. Our station had a request line that listeners could call to dedicate songs or just chat. Most nights I'd get maybe 3 or 4 calls total. People working night shifts, insomniacs, and truck drivers passing through. I enjoyed talking to them. It broke up the monotony. At 1:47 a.m., the request line lit up. "WKRP, you're on with Marcus," I said in my practiced radio voice. Silence, but not dead silence. I could hear breathing, soft, measured breathing. "Hello, you're on the air," I repeated. Then a voice, male, deep, slightly distorted as if speaking through some kind of filter. "I'm listening to you, Marcus." "Well, that's great," I said with a chuckle. "What can I play for you tonight?" "I don't want you to play anything. I just want you to know I'm watching you." My blood went cold. I glanced at the window facing the parking lot. My car sat alone under the streetlight, nothing else but darkness and trees. "Okay, buddy, prank calls aren't really—" "You're wearing a blue flannel shirt tonight, and those same worn-out jeans you always wear on Tuesdays." I looked down at my clothes. Blue flannel, jeans. My mouth went dry. "You spilled coffee on your shirt earlier. There's a stain near the 3rd button." I touched the stain unconsciously. It was there, from when I'd arrived and poured my first cup. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice no longer steady. "A fan, your most devoted listener. I'm always watching, Marcus, always listening." The line went dead. I immediately stood up and checked every window. The parking lot was empty. The production room behind me was dark. I was alone, but someone had seen me. Someone knew exactly what I was wearing, knew about the coffee stain. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone had been in the parking lot earlier when I arrived. Maybe they'd seen me through the window and were just messing with me. But the station was at the end of a dead-end road. Nobody just passed by here. I locked the studio door from the inside, something I'd never done before, and tried to focus on my show. But every few minutes, I found myself staring out the windows, searching the darkness for any sign of movement. At 2:33 a.m., the phone rang again. I stared at the blinking light on the request line. My hand hovered over the button. I should just ignore it. But what if it was a legitimate caller? What if ignoring it made things worse? I answered. "You locked the door," the same distorted voice said immediately. "That's smart, Marcus. But locks only work if you're inside and they're outside." "I'm calling the police," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "And tell them what? Did someone call your request line? Can someone see you through the windows of a radio station? They'll tell you to call back if something actually happens." He was right. I knew he was right. "What do you want?" I asked. "I just want you to know that I'm here. I've always been here. Every Tuesday night for the past 8 months, I've been listening and watching." 8 months. I'd been working this shift for 5 years, but he specifically said 8 months. What happened 8 months ago? I tried to remember if anything significant had occurred, if I'd offended someone on air, if... "You're trying to remember," he said, and I could hear the smile in it. "Don't hurt yourself thinking. You wouldn't remember me. You see, Marcus, you never noticed me, but I noticed you. Look, if I did something to offend you, I didn't offend you. You just didn't see me. Nobody ever sees me. That's why I like the nighttime. In the darkness, I'm not invisible. I'm everywhere." My hands were shaking. I looked at the clock. 2:36 a.m. 3.5 more hours until the morning DJ arrived. "I'm going to stay on the line with you for a while," the voice continued. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I'm here, with you." "I'm hanging up," I said. "If you hang up, I'll have to come inside to continue our conversation." I froze, my finger hovering over the disconnect button. "That's right, Marcus. Keep me on the phone, and I'll stay right where I am. Hang up, and I'll have no choice but to visit you in person." For the next hour, I sat in that studio with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to breathing, just breathing. Occasionally, the voice would speak. "You're playing the wrong song. Track 7 is better. You should drink some water. You look pale. Don't look behind you. There's nothing there yet." That last one made my spine turn to ice. Yet? What did he mean by yet? At 3:47 a.m., I heard it, a sound in the production room behind me, a soft scraping, like something being dragged across the floor. "Did you hear that?" the voice on the phone asked. "I told you, I'm everywhere in the darkness." I spun around in my chair. The production room was still dark, but now I could see a shape, a figure standing perfectly still in the corner, barely visible in the shadows. "You see me now, don't you, Marcus?" The figure in the production room didn't move, but I knew it was the source of the voice. "How did you get in here?" I whispered. "I never left, Marcus. I've always been here. In the basement, in the storage room, in the walls. This building has so many dark places, so many places where someone can hide and watch and wait." I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't work. The figure in the production room began to move, stepping into the faint light coming from the studio.
And that's when I saw his face, or rather, where his face should have been. He was wearing some kind of mask, smooth, featureless, like a mannequin. Don't you want to see your most devoted listener? He raised his hands to the mask, beginning to remove it. I don't know where I found the strength, but I bolted from that chair. I unlocked the studio door and ran through the hallway, past the production room, past the offices, and burst out the front entrance into the parking lot. I got in my car and drove straight to the police station. They went to the radio station with me just before dawn. We searched every room, every closet, every dark corner. They found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no evidence anyone had been there.
But in the production room, exactly where I'd seen the figure standing, they found something. A single coffee mug. My coffee mug. The one I'd been using that night. It was sitting on the floor in the corner, still warm. I quit the next day. I never worked another overnight shift again. But sometimes, late at night, I'll be flipping through radio stations in my car, and I'll catch a few seconds of WKRP. And just before I change the channel, I swear I can hear breathing underneath the music. Soft, measured breathing. He's still listening, and maybe he's still watching.
Story 2. The Voice in the Basement. This story comes from a woman named Sarah, who worked as an overnight DJ at a college radio station in Oregon. She reached out to me after hearing about what happened to Marcus, saying she needed to share her experience. College radio stations are different from commercial ones. They're usually run by students, operate on shoestring budgets, and are often housed in the oldest, most neglected buildings on campus. The station where Sarah worked, KXVU, was located in the basement of the communications building, a structure built in 1923. Sarah loved her overnight slot. As a junior majoring in broadcast journalism, she saw it as valuable experience. The station operated from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., and Sarah handled the midnight to 2 a.m. shift 3 nights a week. The basement layout was simple: a main studio, a small production booth, a record library, and a narrow hallway that connected everything. At the far end of the hallway was a door marked "Maintenance, Authorized Personnel Only." Sarah had never seen anyone go through that door in her 8 months at the station. On a Thursday night in late November, Sarah was alone in the studio playing a mix of indie rock and electronic music. It was 12:47 a.m., and the campus was dead. Most students were either asleep or studying for finals. She was queuing up the next song when she heard it. A voice, faint, distant, but definitely a voice. It seemed to be coming from somewhere below her. Sarah paused, pulled off her headphones, and listened. Nothing, just the hum of the equipment and the muffled sound of the song playing on the air. She put her headphones back on and continued working. But 5 minutes later, she heard it again. This time it was clearer. A woman's voice, singing. The melody was old-fashioned, something from the 1940s maybe, but Sarah couldn't make out the words. She stood up and stepped into the hallway. The singing was louder out here, and it was definitely coming from behind the maintenance door. Sarah approached the door slowly. She'd been told during her training never to go through it, that it just led to the building's old utility systems and wasn't safe. But the singing continued, beautiful and haunting. She tried the door handle, locked. "Hello?" she called out. The singing stopped immediately. Sarah waited, her ear pressed against the door. Silence. Then a new sound. Footsteps. Someone was climbing stairs on the other side of the door, coming up toward her. She backed away quickly and returned to the studio, locking herself inside. Her heart was pounding. Someone was in that restricted area. Maybe a homeless person had found a way in from outside. She should call campus security. But before she could reach for her phone, the studio lights flickered, then went out completely. Sarah was plunged into total darkness except for the faint glow of the equipment LEDs. The song that had been playing on the air cut out, replaced by static. "No, no, no," she muttered, fumbling for her phone to use as a flashlight. Then she heard it, the woman's voice again, but this time it wasn't singing, it was speaking, and it was coming from the studio speakers. "Let me out!" Sarah's blood turned to ice. That voice wasn't part of any song. It was raw, desperate, real. "Please, let me out. I've been down here so long." "Who are you?" Sarah whispered, even though the voice couldn't possibly hear her. "The door! Open the door! Please!" The lights flickered back on, and the regular broadcast resumed as if nothing had happened. Sarah stood in the middle of the studio, shaking. She grabbed her phone and called campus security. When the officer arrived, 20 minutes later, a bored-looking guy in his 50s, Sarah explained what happened. "The maintenance area?" he said, scratching his head. "There's nothing down there but the old boiler system, been decommissioned for years." "Someone's down there," Sarah insisted. "I heard them." The security officer sighed, but agreed to check. He had a master key for the building. Together, they opened the maintenance door. Beyond it was a metal staircase descending into darkness. The officer clicked on his flashlight and started down. Sarah hesitated, then followed. The stairs went much farther than Sarah expected. Down, down, into a sub-basement she didn't even know existed. The air grew colder with each step, and there was a smell, musty, old, like a place that hadn't been disturbed in decades. At the bottom, the officer's flashlight revealed a long corridor with several doors on either side. Ancient pipes ran along the ceiling, covered in rust and cobwebs. "This is the old mechanical level," the officer explained. "They built the new systems on the ground floor years ago. Nobody comes down here anymore." He tried the first door, locked. The second, also locked, but the third door was slightly ajar. The officer pushed it open, and his flashlight beam swept across a small room. It looked like it once been an office or storage area. There was a desk, a filing cabinet, and on the wall, dozens of old photographs pinned up with tacks. Sarah stepped closer to look at the photographs. They were all of the same woman, a young woman in 1940s-style clothing, posing for what looked like publicity shots. In some photos, she was standing in front of a microphone. "Helen Chambers," the officer said, reading a nameplate on one of the photos. "I'll be damned, I've heard about her." "Who is she?" Sarah asked. "She was a radio personality back in the 40s, worked for the original station that used to broadcast from this building before it became a college station. There's a story about her, kind of a local legend." "What kind of story?" The officer's expression turned serious. "She disappeared, just vanished one night during her shift. They found the studio empty, the microphone still on, the record still spinning. Never saw her again." Sarah felt a chill run through her entire body. "When did she disappear?" "November 1947, 70-something years ago." "What day in November?" The officer thought for a moment. "I don't remember exactly, but I think it was November 23rd, Sarah interrupted, checking her phone. "That's today, the anniversary." They stood in silence, the weight of the realization settling over them. "Let me out!" The voice came from somewhere in the darkness beyond the room.
Both Sarah and the officer spun around, the flashlight beam dancing across the corridor. "Please, I'm still here. I've been here so long." The voice was moving, growing more distant, as if walking away from them deeper into the sub-basement. The officer, to his credit, didn't run, but Sarah could see the fear in his eyes. "We need to leave, now," he said firmly. They hurried back up the metal staircase, and the officer locked the maintenance door behind them. Sarah quit her position at the radio station the next day. But she did some research first. She discovered that Helen Chambers had been working the overnight shift when she disappeared. Her last broadcast had ended at exactly 2 a.m. She was playing a song, a jazz number from 1944, when the transmission suddenly cut to static. Multiple witnesses reported that for weeks after her disappearance, they could hear her voice late at night coming from the radio station, calling for help, begging to be let out. Eventually, the report stopped. The old station shut down in the 1960s, and the building was converted for college use. But Sarah believes Helen never left. She's still down there in that sub-basement, trapped in whatever darkness took her that November night in 1947. Still singing, still calling out, still waiting for someone to open the door and let her out.
Story 3. The Empty Studio. Our final story comes from Daniel, an overnight DJ at KMTL in Montana. His experience is the most disturbing of all because what he encountered wasn't a stranger or a ghost from the past. It was himself. Daniel had been working at KMTL for 2 years when it happened. The station was small but well established, serving a town of about 15,000 people. The building was modern, built in the early 2000s, with state-of-the-art equipment and security cameras throughout. Daniel's shift ran from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. He'd grown comfortable with the solitude, often using the quiet hours to work on his own music production between segments. On a Wednesday night in March, Daniel arrived at the station at 12:45 a.m. as usual. He relieved the evening DJ, locked the front door behind him, and settled into the studio. Everything was normal until 3:17 a.m. Daniel had just finished playing a set and was about to start his next segment when he noticed something odd. The production room monitor, a screen that showed feeds from the station's security cameras, was flickering. He walked over to check it. The screen cycled through different camera views: the parking lot, the front entrance, the hallway, and the studio itself. But when the studio camera feed appeared, Daniel's heart stopped. On the screen, he could see himself sitting at the desk. But he wasn't at the desk. He was standing by the monitor, looking at the screen. He spun around. The studio was empty except for him. He looked back at the monitor. The figure on screen, the other Daniel, was still sitting at the desk, wearing headphones, going through the motions of running the show. Then Daniel looked up, directly at the camera, directly at him, and smiled. Daniel grabbed his phone and called his manager, a man named Rob who lived 20 minutes away. "Rob, something's wrong with the security system," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I need you to come down here." Rob, groggy but concerned by the tone in Daniel's voice, agreed to come. While he waited, Daniel avoided looking at the monitor. He stayed in the studio, continued running his show, and tried to rationalize what he'd seen. A glitch, some kind of delayed feed, a technical malfunction. But at 3:33 a.m., he heard it. His own voice coming from the production room. And that was Midnight Special by CCR. You're listening to KMTL, and I'm Daniel Morrison, keeping you company through the night. Daniel ran to the production room.
The voice was coming from the monitor speakers. The security feed showed the other Daniel, sitting in the studio, speaking into the microphone. But the real Daniel was in the production room. The real studio was empty. "This can't be happening," Daniel whispered. He watched himself on the monitor, doing his job, playing music, and reading the weather forecast, everything he should be doing. When Rob arrived at 4:05 a.m., Daniel was sitting in the hallway outside the studio, pale and shaking. "What's going on?" Rob asked. Daniel couldn't explain it coherently. He just led Rob to the production room and pointed at the monitor. The security feed showed an empty studio. "I don't understand," Rob said. "What am I looking at?" "You don't see him? You don't see me sitting there?" Daniel asked. Rob looked at Daniel with concern. "Who? The studio's empty, Dan." Daniel stared at the monitor. Rob was right. Now the feed showed exactly what it should, an empty studio, no one at the desk. "He was there," Daniel insisted. "Just a few minutes ago, I saw myself sitting there, running the show." Rob checked the timestamp on the recorded footage. He rewound it to 3:17 a.m. when Daniel first saw the anomaly. The recording showed exactly what Rob had seen, an empty studio, no other Daniel, nothing unusual. "You've been working too many overnight shifts," Rob said gently. "When's the last time you had a full night's sleep?" Daniel wanted to argue, but what could he say? The evidence showed nothing. Maybe he had been hallucinating from exhaustion. Rob stayed with him for the rest of the shift. At 6 a.m., the morning DJ arrived, and Daniel went home. But the story doesn't end there. 2 weeks later, Daniel was scrolling through his phone when he received a notification from the radio station's cloud backup system. It was an automated alert about storage space. Out of curiosity, he checked the system. That's when he found it. There were 2 sets of recordings from that night, 2 separate audio feeds from the studio, both time-stamped identically, both from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. on the night of the incident. Daniel's hands trembled as he downloaded both files. The first recording was his show, his voice, his song selections, everything he remembered doing that night. The second recording was also his show, his voice, reading the same weather forecast, playing the same songs, but not quite the same. In the second recording, Daniel heard himself say something that made his blood run cold. "If you're listening to this, it means you saw me. Don't worry, I'm just practicing. Soon, I won't need you anymore. Soon, I'll be the only one." Daniel quit KMTL the next day. He moved to a different state and changed careers entirely. He never worked in radio again. But sometimes, late at night, he'll be driving through an unfamiliar town and he'll flip past a random radio station, and for just a second, he'll hear a voice that sounds exactly like his own. And he wonders, in how many realities there's a version of him still sitting in that studio, still running that show, still waiting to become the only one.
3 stories, 3 overnight DJs, 3 encounters with things that shouldn't exist in the rational world we think we understand. Marcus, who discovered that some listeners watch from the shadows. Sarah, who learned that some voices have been calling out for decades, trapped in the darkness below. And Daniel, who found that sometimes the most terrifying thing you can encounter in the dead of night is yourself. These stories remind us that the overnight shift, whether in a radio station, a hospital, a gas station, or anywhere else, is different. When the rest of the world sleeps, those who work through the darkness exist in a liminal space where the normal rules don't always apply.
The radio keeps playing, the DJs keep talking, but in those lonely hours before dawn, in those soundproof rooms where no one can hear you scream, sometimes the darkness listens back. If you enjoyed these terrifying true tales from Mr. Shadow's stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. I bring you new horror stories every week, real experiences from real people who've encountered the unexplainable. Share your own stories in the comments below. Have you worked an overnight shift? Have you experienced something you can't explain? You're not alone, and you're always welcome here in the shadows. Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked. This is Mr. Shadows, reminding you that some stories are too dark to be fiction. Good night and good luck.